Running for a distance of 18 miles, today's North Yorkshire Moors Railway is one of the longest in the British preservation movement, passing through some of the most stunning landscapes to be found along any of our heritage railway routes. Originally, the line formed part of one of 3 routes to the Yorkshire coastal town of Whitby. A junction was made with the main York to Scarborough line at Rillington, striking northwards to Pickering, where lines also cast off to both the east and west. Continuing northwards through Levisham, Newtondale and Goathland, the line eventually reached Gromont, where a junction was made with the Esk Valley route from Middlesbrough. When originally constructed, a route was taken via Beckhole to Goathland, but as this included an often hazardous 1 in 10 rope-hauled incline, the scene of a number of unfortunate accidents, an alternative route was eventually cut further to the east. The North Yorkshire Moors Railway's preservation pioneers originally intended to run trains on a 6.5-mile section from Gromont to Ellerbeck, just south of Goathland, with hope of eventually extending, stage by stage, towards Pickering. However, when the railway opened to the public in 1973, services were operated over the full 18 miles between Gromont and Pickering. This happened largely due to lobbying by the influential North Riding County Council and the North Yorkshire Moors National Park Committee, who were keen to avoid traffic congestion in the national park. In the early part of the 19th century, Whitby was a remote community, reached only by hazardous moorland roads. The only real access to the town for trade and commerce was by sea. The construction of a canal to the town was considered, but eventually local businessmen commissioned George Stephenson to examine the possibility of building a rail link. Two routes were surveyed, one along the Esk Valley to Middlesbrough and the other to Pickering, which was eventually favoured. With a limited budget, George Stephenson planned the route in the 1830s. Construction work began in September 1833, with a 6-mile section from Whitby to Gromont opening in 1835, at first for stone traffic, and soon after a passenger service was started. A short while later, a passenger service commenced to the south, between Pickering and Raindale, which is to the north of Levisham. Linking the two sections of line involved cutting a route through some of the most difficult and unwelcoming terrain in the British Isles. Here at Fen Bog, major difficulties were encountered, with navvies having to sink a platform of brushwood, timber and even heather-filled sheep fleeces to provide a causeway for the track work. The whole route, including the mile-long ropeworks incline, opened on the 26th of May 1836 and was one of this country's first railways. For the first 9 years, single-coach horse-drawn passenger trains worked between Whitby and Pickering. With a leisurely pace of a mere 10 miles per hour, the journey took 2.5 hours. The original tunnel at Gromont, through Lease Rig, is still intact. When this was cut, rich iron deposits were discovered and prompted the industrialisation of Gromont. Over the years, the railway was responsible for transporting ironstone, alum, building stone and coal, all of which were mined along the route. Limestone was also quarried extensively in the Pickering area, and the mineral trains generated from all this activity contributed greatly to the line's prosperity. George Hudson's York and North Midland Railway purchased the line and many improvements were implemented. Elsewhere, steam locomotives were proving their worth, and in order to take advantage of them on the Whitby line, sharp curves were straightened, heavier rail was laid, and an engine shed was built at the foot of Beck Hole Incline. The first steam trains entered Whitby in 1847. A new tunnel was cut at Gromont. Permanent station buildings were erected at Whitby, Gromont, Goathland and Pickering, and the track work was doubled in the 1840s. The route was also extended to the south of Pickering to make a junction with George Hudson's York to Scarborough line at Rillington, to the east of Malton. The whole route was absorbed into the newly formed North Eastern Railway in 1854. Trains were originally signalled by flag, with blue flags indicating stop, red indicating go slow, and white to proceed. Other signalling styles were tried out prior to the development of the semaphore system in the 1840s. The perilous Beck Hole Incline was a major obstacle to running of an efficient railway, and so a new, more effective route was planned. The new route opened in 1865, the same year as the S Valley line opened, making a junction with the Moors line at Gromont. The deviation included a continuous 1 in 49 gradient from Gromont to Goathland. Being one of the steepest gradients in Britain, the new route involved the construction of a station at Goathland and required the blasting and cutting through various rock formations. For the first 50 years or so, regular safety patrols were carried out along the unstable earthworks until the undergrowth got to grips with the banks, putting an end to the problem of hazardous rockfalls. The original route can be seen in the background here, as a train climbs towards the summit, south of Goathland. With the opening of the deviation, Beck Hole Incline was closed, but the rails towards Gromont were maintained to serve private sidings and the Esk Valley ironstone mines. The Beck Hole line reopened for summer passenger services for a short period of time between 1908 and the outbreak of the First World War. However, flooding in 1931 resulted in a cutback in the length of the line for the remainder of its life. Here, a train is seen climbing south of Gromont, parallel to the Beck Hole trackbed. The Esk Valley hamlet of 24 cottages was built here in 1870 as accommodation for the ironstone mine workers. As there was no road access to the hamlet until 1951, the residents relied totally on the branch, which remained open until that time. Diesel operation was introduced along the Pickering line in 1958 in the form of diesel multiple units in an attempt to reduce operational costs and reverse the general decline in profitability that was being experienced across the country. Closure of all three routes to Whitby was proposed in the Beeching Plan, and although the Esk Valley line to Middlesbrough survived, local support was unable to prevent closure of the Pickering line, the axe finally falling on March the 8th, 1965. Here, Stanier Class 5 number 45428 hauls a train between Newbridge and Pickering. Many sidings existed along this section to serve the limestone quarries, and the line remained open between Rillington Junction and Newbridge until July 1966 for the use of freight traffic from Newbridge Quarry.
In 1963, when the Dr. Beeching report came out, the line from Gromont to Pickering and through to Malton was recommended for closure. The local residents of Whitby, one of them who was an engine driver at Whitby, Fred Stewart, and two or three other people, were very adamant that the railway line was going to stay open, and that with their efforts they eventually succeeded in opening the railway. There was an informal meeting at Whitby on the 6th of June 1967, and at this meeting was the birth of the North Yorkshire Moors Railway Preservation Society. Their aims were to open the railway from Gromont as far south as possible towards Pickering. At the same time, in the northeast of England at Newcastle, there was a group, the North Eastern Locomotive Preservation Group, who had seen the demise of steam on the horizon and were saving up money to buy a locomotive, the actual locomotive that we sat on at present. The two groups eventually came in contact with each other. The North Yorkshire Moors Railway Preservation Society were trying to buy a railway, and the North Eastern Locomotive Preservation Group were buying locomotives and had nowhere to run the locomotives. Both groups came to an agreement and the movement was formed. Smaller locomotives were first obtained by private people who were buying locomotives, and the first of those to arrive was an engine called Mervale on the 2nd of February 1969, and it was steamed from Pickering through to Gromont and kept in Gromont Tunnel. By that time, the North Eastern Locomotive Preservation Group had preserved two engines from BR, and they arrived in 1970 and 71 respectively. British Railways allowed track access to the land and the premises in 1969 for the preservationists to maintain and try and restore the track between Gromont and Pickering, and in 1970 they allowed them to run gala trains. The first steam gala was at Easter weekend 1970, when Salmon and Mervale were doing shuttles between Gothland and Gothland Summit, and the rail bus which the Preservation Society had bought in 1968 from Gromont up to Gothland. As the larger engines came, the service was extended from Gromont to Gothland Summit, and in time the railway opened. In 1973 the railway obtained a light railway order, and the railway opened to the general public on the 23rd of April 1973, with an official opening by the Duchess of Kent on the 1st of May 1973. Ever since then we have run a train service from Gromont to Pickering, firstly with steam locomotives from Gromont to Gothland, and with diesel multiple units from Gothland to Pickering. The reason we had to use diesel multiple units from Gothland to Pickering in the beginning was that there was no run-round facilities for steam locomotives at all at Pickering, and until some track work which was required had been undertaken and the run-round facilities replaced at Pickering, we had to rely on diesel multiple units. The railway was purchased from British Railways, as I say, in 1972. The price for the land from Gromont through to Pickering was £2,500, and the price of the rail from Gromont to Gothland Summit was £40,000, and the Preservation Society had succeeded in acquiring £42,000 for the purchase. The line from Pickering to Ellerbeck was still in situ, and British Railways was starting to lift the line in late 1970-71. and they were about to lift the line. They'd lifted one line and they were about to lift the second line when the North Riding County Council stepped in and said that to British Railways, don't lift the track yet because we want to assist these preservationists in trying to preserve the railway. Successful negotiations were concluded and the North Riding County Council purchased the railway for £60,000 from Ellerbeck to Pickering, which the Preservation Society had to repay over a period of years. In 1971, the Preservation Society was changed from a Preservation Society to a Historical Railway Trust, and this year in 1996/97 we've actually paid the final payment of the loan, and the railway now belongs to the Trust, full stop. When we were first allowed on the premises in 1969, the track had been maintained to a very high standard by one of the founder members, who was the actual permanent way inspector for British Railways on this line. Joe Brown was a gentleman and he maintained his railway to a high standard. Fortunately for the Preservation Society, there was very little work to do, but work had to be done on repainting stations, fencing to keep the sheep off, taking the weeds out of the track. There were certain pieces of track that in British Railways days should have been renewed, and this, particularly in the Levisham area, stopped as running trains, steam trains of heavy weights until we renewed the track. Over the years we've been changing the wooden sleepers for concrete sleepers because they last a lot longer. We're putting flat bottom rail in because in the future bullhead rail is going to become scarce, you're not going to be able to obtain it. And we've brought the railway up from a 20-ton axle load, which was allowed in British Railways days, to 22-ton axle load, so that we can use locomotives that wouldn't have been dreamt of using in our days.
Gromont is the northern terminus of the present-day North Yorkshire Moors Railway. The station dates from the 1840s, when steam appeared on the line for the very first time. Ironstone was once mined at Gromont, giving rise to an industrial landscape, although today it is very much a rural moorland community. Many sidings used to serve traffic, generated by the blast furnaces and the brickworks, lime kilns, stone quarries and whinstone mines that existed in the area. The brickwork used in the construction of the signal box located next to the level crossing was acquired from the one demolished at Whitby. Commissioned in 1996, it stands on the opposite side of the road and the running lines from the original crossing box. The 52-lever frame which controls movements around Gromont came from Hordon in County Durham. The box is unusual in that it is equipped with 2 gate wheels. After the crossing gates have opened, former Great Western 280 tank number 4277 approaches the station. When the heavy freight locomotive has run round its train, it departs once again for Pickering. Looking northwards from the station, a pair of sidings to the right are used for the storage of coaching stock. Railtrack's Esk Valley line is to the left, the former junction once being controlled by a signal box, which was sited in the V of the junction. Here, a regional railways train is seen approaching Gromont from Whitby. The Railtrack station is situated on a curve adjacent to the North Yorkshire Moors station and is designated Platform 1. Platform 2, which is now the main NYMR departure platform, is on the east of the triangle, which is made up by the S Valley line, the Moors line and the road through the town. A car park now exists between the two platforms, although this was once the site of Gromont Goods Yard. In order to accommodate the full length of trains now operated by the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, Platform 2 has been extended at the northern end. This was completed in 1990 and involved the slewing of the track work on the S Valley Railtrack line. Although not currently passed for passenger use, the up platform, which used to have the former locomotive run-round track walled off, has been converted to an island platform. Hopefully, in the future, both platform faces will be available for train departures. Of the buildings at Gromont, the wooden booking office dates from 1913 and was once the waiting room at Slates between Gromont and Whitby. The junction signal box once stood close to this building, when the platform was shorter. After hauling its train into Gromont, Stanier Class 5 number 45428 proceeds to run round for the next departure. With the locomotive recoupled to its train, passengers board for the journey southwards, along what has now become one of the most popular heritage railways in the country. The train departs, crossing the road and heading towards Gromont Tunnel, which lies just beyond a river crossing. Immediately to the south of Gromont Tunnel, the North Yorkshire Moors Railway have established their main locomotive operational department. Here the running fleet is being prepared for one of the railway's popular Thomas the Tank Engine weekends. The buildings erected closest to the running lines are utilised for the heavy overhaul and maintenance of locomotives. The running shed, adjacent, occupies land on which the former BR staff homes known as tunnel cottages once stood. Latterly, used for NYMR volunteer accommodation, the cottages were demolished in 1989. After being prepared for a day's service, the former North Eastern Railway 080 freight locomotive number 901 moves off shed. Deviation shed was erected in 1979 and provides cover for the locomotive fleet owned by the North Eastern Locomotive Preservation Group. Gromont Deviation Signal Box, which controlled train movements onto the Beck Hole branch, stood close by the northern end of the shed. The North Yorkshire Moors Railway commissioned this coal hopper just north of Deviation Shed in 1989. Here, ex-Southern Railway Schools Class 440 Repton runs under the hopper. Built roughly to the size and design of an LMS Stranraer hopper, approximately 20 tonnes of coal can be held for servicing the running fleet. Before the start of a day's services, 45428 stands by the tunnel exit as Repton emerges, heading south to work the first train of the day from Pickering. The Gromont Depot water crane is located here, close to the tunnel. The Class 5's tender is seen being replenished. Now ready to work the first southbound service, 45428 moves off towards the station. Later, the 1937 Armstrong Whitworth-built 460 bursts out of the tunnel with its train. As the Moors line runs towards Goathland, the track bed of the Beck Hole branch, which formed part of the original route to Pickering, can still clearly be seen to the right, nowadays providing vehicle access to the otherwise isolated locomotive depot. The Moors line follows the Merck-esque valley southwards as the gruelling 1 in 49 climb towards Goathland begins. This train is captured as the line passes close by Beck Hole. The gradient prevails for no less than 3 miles and produces some spectacular sights and sounds as the locomotives attack the bank. Here, an ex-Southern Railways pairing of Repton and bullied West Country Pacific Heartland are captured at Darnholme, close to Goathland. .4277 makes its final approach towards Goathland, still on the 1 in 49 grade. After the train from Pickering has crossed at Goathland, the 280 tank resumes its journey. Goathland Station, first opened on the 1st of July 1865, is a typical North Eastern Railway design. Positioned away from the village due to the rerouting of the line, it is largely unaltered from BR days. However, a footbridge of authentic NER style from Howden-on-Tyne was erected in the mid-1980s. The signal box still stands at the southern end of the down platform and is equipped with its original lever frame. However, an extra lever has been added, giving a total of 21 levers. Goathland Goods Shed is located in the station yard on the downside of the running lines. Although no longer in situ, a line used to lie between the goods shed track work and the signal box. Rising on a ramp, this was used for shunting wagons over the coal and lime drops. A stone-built structure adjacent to the main station building covered the lime drops, and this can be clearly seen here from outside the station, with the coal drops immediately to the right. Timber buildings are to be found on the up platform and are original, dating from early North Eastern Railway days. At the Pickering end of the up platform stands a water tower, and sidings off the running line extend behind the platform. A further siding, although disconnected from the main sidings, runs southward behind the water tower. It used to run beyond the fence in this shot, and was used for the loading of wagons from a narrow gauge tramway, which ran parallel on the adjacent hillside. With narrow gauge mineral wagons arriving at Goathland, a stone crusher could once be found stood on the hillside. The small brick-built weighbridge office still stands as a reminder of the activity which was once part of the everyday scene here. 45428 is captured here, hauling a Pickering-bound train into the station. The crossing service from the south enters Goathland with 30926 Repton at its head. Following the departure of the northbound train, number 45428, these days named Eric Tracy, moves off. Beyond Goathland, the line carries on climbing towards the summit at 550 feet above sea level. An ex-LMS pairing of 45428 and the Hughes-designed Crab number 42765 are captured here, just to the south of Goathland. A signal box was once located near the summit of the line. 34101 is seen climbing hard, south of Goathland. A double-headed working nears the summit. Following the heavy gradient from Gromont, trains descend into the remote valley of Newtondale. A signal box also used to be located in Newtondale. In the depths of Newtondale, a halt, which opened in 1981, has been built to allow passengers to discover the more remote parts of the gorge. It is constructed with materials which came from Warrenby Halt near Redcar. Here, 4277 is seen approaching Newtondale Halt from Goathland. The hillsides of Newtondale were once bare, the trees seen today having been planted by the Forestry Commission in the 1930s as part of a plan to make Britain self-sufficient in timber. The distance between Goathland and Levisham is around 8.5 miles and was once one of the longest gaps between stations on any British passenger route. Here, the former LNER K1, number 2005, climbs to the north of Levisham, with a train bound for Goathland. Levisham Station is located in the valley some 1.5 miles from the village itself. The building on the down platform is no longer in railway use, having comprised of the station house and ticket office. Originally being built as a farmhouse, it was converted when the railway arrived at Levisham and was remodelled and extended in the 1840s. A brick-built waiting shelter is situated on the up platform and dates from sometime after 1873, when the line was in the ownership of the North Eastern Railway. The small signal box at the Goathland end of the up platform protects the level crossing and is also from North Eastern Railway days. Sidings still exist on the upside of the running lines, extending behind the platform where a further siding once ran into the area now occupied by the car park. Beyond the station, Levisham Straight runs towards Pickering, with the track work between Levisham and Pickering being singled during World War I. The lifted track was sent to aid the war efforts. Part of the former up line to the left of the formation remained intact along Levisham Straight to provide a long siding and head shunts. Backed by the woodland scenery, Repton, which emerged from Eastleigh Works in 1934, coasts round the long sweeping curve which marks the approach to Levisham Station. After the crossing down train has arrived, 30926 proceeds with the final leg of its journey to Pickering. Here, 45428 is captured on Levisham Strait. Four 5428 is seen on another occasion, at the end of Levisham Strait. Beyond Levisham Strait, a signal box used to stand in close proximity to Farworth cottages. The cottages are typical 19th century railway cottages, and in the past, special market day trains would stop here, and at other isolated cottages along the route, in order to ferry goods and shoppers to Pickering. 4277 hauls a train past Farworth cottages. The line between Levisham and Pickering is free from the severe gradients experienced on the northern section of the route. New Bridge lies roughly 3/4 of a mile north of Pickering. Here, where sidings existed for the New Bridge quarry, the North Yorkshire Moors Railway have established their permanent way departments. One of the railway's smaller locomotives, J72 number 69023, draws a short train past the New Bridge site. There is also a level crossing at New Bridge, in close proximity to the permanent way depot. The crossing signal box was erected here at some time in the mid-19th century, and nowadays controls all movements in the Pickering area. 30926 Repton is seen at New Bridge with a Pickering-bound train. The Schools class locomotive is seen here once again, running into platform 1 at Pickering at the end of its journey over the Moors line. Before entering Pickering station, trains encounter a level crossing. High Mill Crossing box once stood here, close to the side of the road and to the left of the running lines. Hidden behind stock in this shot is the railway's turntable. The 60-foot turntable was acquired from the National Railway Museum, formerly North York MPD, where it was installed around 1950. It is on the site of the original Pickering turntable well. The present-day station at Pickering dates from the arrival of steam on the line. Built by George Hudson to a G.T. Andrews design, it originally featured an overall roof, which was unfortunately removed in 1953. When first built, the station's 2 platform lengths coincided with the length of the overall roof, but as demand for longer trains came about, they were extended. In 1991, the North Yorkshire Moors Railway further lengthened and raised the height of platform 1. Although there was never a footbridge at Pickering, this North Eastern Railway example, similar to that at Goathland, was erected in 1996. The wooden building, which stands on the extended section of Platform 1, was acquired from Whitby, where it used to serve as a locomen's mess room. To the north of Platform 2, sheds have been erected by the North Yorkshire Moors Railway. These provide undercover working facilities for the carriage and wagon department to restore and paint the preserved rolling stock. The works became operational in the late 1980s and stand at the spot where sidings once existed. Looking south from the station, the railway ends at the buffer stops. When the line continued on towards Rillington Junction, this was the location of Bridge Street level crossing and signal box. There are further indications of a former railway presence in the town, to the south of the station. Whilst the roadway now obliterates any sign of the goods yard, the ex-railway-owned gasworks retort and purifier house still stand. This, along with a 40-foot diameter gasometer, used to stand adjacent to the goods yard and at one time supplied gas for the station lighting. Beyond the A170 road, which was crossed by Hungate level crossing, is the former single road engine shed. The line passed over the bridge to the right, and the three-way junction was just beyond the shed. Here 4277 pulls a train into Pickering Platform 1. After uncoupling, the tank loco draws towards the buffer stops in order to run round its train for the next northbound departure. After taking water, 4277 runs back to join the coaching stock standing in the platform. With the 18-mile journey through Newtondale and over the moors ahead of it, the train departs for Gromont.
In 1969, the beginning of 1969, when I first became involved with the railway only had 3 small locomotives and 2 carriages and 1 rail bus. Over the years, we've built our stock up to where we're now running a train service with 8 trains each way a day and during the high season. And to run this, we need a lot of maintenance facilities. Where we're at present, the engine shed at Gromont, there was just a field and a turntable pit which had been removed by British Railways earlier, and at present now we have maintenance facilities where we can do virtually anything with a locomotive. We can renew boilers, fireboxes, wheels, we do everything. We do far more at the little depot here than they would have dreamed of in BR days on a depot. Much of the work that is undertaken would be carried out in main workshops. We employ on the railway as a whole around 50 full-time workers, all in all different departments, and we're training apprentices to carry the work forward so that in the future the railway will not die because of the lack of manpower and skills.
In addition to the regularly used Mark I coaching stock, the railway provides a base for vehicles dating from earlier periods. Here, 69023 is seen in charge of 2 coaches, one of which dates from North Eastern Railway days during a Victorian weekend early in 1997. Goods vans and wagons are often marshalled into train formations on gala weekends. In this shot, J27 number 65894 is seen working towards Goathland. Riddle's Austerity 210 Dame Vera Lynn, carrying War Department livery and numbered 3672, is captured south of Goathland, with Heartland acting as banker. Once again, the J27 is seen tackling the 1 in 49 with a freight working. From time to time, locomotives from other heritage railways make appearances on the Moors line. XLMS Crab number 42765 was a notable visitor from the East Lancs Railway in 1997.
steam locomotives, they've got to be handled right to get the best results. You have a small locomotive and a large train, a heavy gradient. If you fire it right and drive it right, the engine will take anything you want up the hill. If you overfire the locomotive by putting too much coal on, the engine can't breathe, the fire won't burn, the engine will stop steaming, and the engine will stop halfway up the gradient. I was fortunate. I started work on British Railways as an engine cleaner in 1961, and I was taught some of the skills by the old lads who sadly are dying off in this day and age. We have our own classroom for teaching our own men to work and drive steam locomotives, to keep the skills alive. A lot of people, including myself, would love to see the railway go to Whitby. It's one of my pipe dreams to see the railway to go to Whitby. There's some people say that it would be suicide to go to Whitby. I don't think so, because we have Gromont, which is a little village which on some weekends is absolutely crammed solid with motor cars. And if we could take our passengers through to Whitby, we would relieve congestion in the village of Gromont. I believe we have a market at Whitby waiting to be tapped, where people at Whitby would want to come to Gothland or Pickering and vice versa. The stumbling block is, well, what they used to call British Railways, now rail track. It's legislation again, qualifications, people to drive trains, man trains. We have men, volunteers, and BR staff acting as volunteers on this railway who are quite qualified to drive trains to Whitby. It's just getting the bureaucrats to realise this.